Nobody's going to convince me that I know there are owners who don't want to take certain people because they offend them. For whatever the reason is, he's a distraction. I don't like his father. These are not saints. You want to win? Yeah, but. No. So the NFL is still full of people, but. And if some of them, and I'm not saying all 32 of them, I'm not. If I had to put a number on it, having covered this league for 45 years, what would I say at this point? I'd say there's still 10 or 12 of them at least that would say, nah, we don't want to deal with that.
Michael Wilbon joins us on the Yingling guest hotline. Michael, you were all into the draft more so than I've heard you in the past leading up to it. How do you believe the Bears did?
Well, I'm not a big grader of the draft the next day guy. I believe I'd like to see some people play. Having, let's face it, my formative years of covering the NFL were seeing Joe Montana picked in the 3rd round and Tom Brady picked in the 6th round. So I'm just not big on snap judgments. But, I feel encouraged. I feel encouraged about what they did. I understand why they did what they did. I'd like to have seen one of those running backs selected. But then, I see other reports about, what still may be possible. I mean, there are guys who are going to be let go by other teams. What's the, the once prolific but often injured running back in Cleveland?
Nick Chubb.
Nick Chubb. I see his name mentioned in connection with the Bears, and I'm like, okay, would I take Nick Chubb on this team? You got so many young players, still 2 young tight ends, even though Cole Kmet's a young vet, and a rookie tight end, and a second-year receiver, and DJ Moore still, what is he, 26? I take a veteran, Nick Chubb, at running back with Swift. So if he's a part of this, possibly, I'm encouraged by what they did. I like having the big, young, huge tackle who can be sort of a swing guy who's played 3 years in college, every snap. I like getting I love getting this wide receiver from Missouri who, can also return punts and kicks and some versatility. And clearly the Bears looked at a couple of those late round selections as guys who can also play special teams and give you something there. So anyway, I'm encouraged. I'm optimistic. Does that mean I'm ready to, give a grade? No, I don't care about that stuff. I think it's too fraudulent when the alleged draft experts do that stuff the day after drafts. But I'm encouraged by what they did. I'm optimistic about it. And, seems like a pretty good week.
Before the draft began, Michael, did you have a favorite player that you were hoping would land in Chicago? Who was it?
I'm a child of Gale Sayers and Walter Payton. So that tells you who I would like to have seen end up in Chicago. But, but I understand that wasn't necessarily the best pick, for the Bears. I get that.
But Genty was your favorite player in the draft?
Probably.
Okay.
Probably. There were any number. I think I told you guys there were 6 or 7 people that would make me pretty happy. I would have been okay with either tight end. And the more I understand about the difference between, Warren and Loveland, the more I can say, okay, I understand. Warren is more of sort of a Kmet duplicate, and you don't need that even out of that position. And I get choosing Loveland and what it is that every single scout said about him as a pass receiver. So I'm happy, like I said, I'm happy with that. I didn't have a single favorite guy other than Genty. And if they had chosen Genty, I'd probably be going, well, was that the best use of, Hampton? If we got Hampton, would that have been fine? Yes, that would have been fine as well, Omari and Hampton. So there were any number of ways to go. I don't believe in, one player chosen unless you've got, just an all-time great automatic player sitting at 1. When the Cincinnati Bengals chose Anthony Munoz out of USC, and basically people said coming out of college, going into the draft, and coming out of his 15-year career, this guy's the greatest person to ever play the position, and that was unanimous. Unless you've got that, then there's some alternatives. And I seem to like what we've done.
You're always pretty candid and upfront. Not pretty. You're very candid when it comes to the way our business and especially your business in television and even the network covers stories. How do you feel about what happened with Shedeur Sanders and how he was covered?
Well, I don't think the coverage of it was misguided in any way. I mean, first of all, there's a real hybrid mix of coverage and predicting, and forecasting. And I don't know how you separate those, because it's not the coverage. It was the people projecting who may have screwed it up, may have. I also think the NFL, I like Mel Kiper, to me, nailed this when he came on very testily and said, this was personal. This is not about football. The problem you've got in the NFL more than the other leagues is you got a league in which every coach and every executive wants to use the word distraction, but then they don't have the stones to say out loud, publicly, on the record, we don't want him because this would be a circus. We don't want to do it. And it's their perception of him. And so I don't have, maybe the problem I have with the coverage is there's not enough people to call out NFL people in particular. And yes, I'm picking on the NFL now, because in the NBA and Major League Baseball and the NHL, you have some candid voices. You have some. Most, no. Most are looking out for the business of that sport, and I get that. But in pro football, there are too many people co-opted on television. And there's not enough people, and in print too, and there's not enough people who will say, you're full of you-know-what. There's not. There just isn't that. And so you've got this situation where I believe with Boomer Esiason, and Boomer Esiason is somebody who I know is candid. I took Boomer Esiason when he was a freshman at the University of Maryland. I've known him all of his life and all of mine, and love him. And when Boomer says he believes, or he's reporting, that they're sorry about the noise outside. I'm standing near Union Square in San Francisco, where it's unavoidable. When he said that there were owners who told their people to take him off the draft board, meaning Shedeur Sanders, I know Boomer's 100% accurate. They don't have the stones to say that publicly or to own up to it. And you could say, well, maybe they shouldn't. All right, maybe they shouldn't. But nobody ever does. And the NFL is the biggest offender of that. And because when you're the boss, you're the domestic entertainment god that the NFL is, you can basically tell people to take a walk anytime you want, and they do. And in the meantime, they're full of it, and nobody calls them on it. I'm glad Boomer did.
I wonder did Boomer also kind of identify or give you thoughts on
I don't know.
Which teams it were? Because those are losing teams. If you're not drafting a player who you believe is a upper echelon starting quarterback in the National Football League because you're worried of the quote-unquote circus, boy, that team is destined to fail. Because there are plenty of guys. There are plenty of guys that are somewhat distractions, but if they can play, they're being drafted.
But not like this. And there are plenty of reasons the NFL teams have not drafted over the years. I mean, we're only 20 years into the point where NFL teams would draft a black quarterback, even though he might have been able to lead them to a championship. We're only 20 years into that.
I know, Mike, but the first quarterback, Cam Ward was the first pick of the draft this year, and the first two picks last year were both African-American quarterbacks.
I said we're 20 years into it.
I know, but I
mean we're 20 years in. But 20 years ago, Tommy, that wasn't the case. I'm not going to absolve the NFL all of a sudden or give people the benefit of the doubt in the NFL. The NFL has been full of bigots, owners, and executives for 100 years. So because they picked the last few years, they finally find religion with black quarterbacks, all of a sudden they're absolved of decades of not doing it? Sorry. They're not.
I'm not suggesting they should be absolved of their sins. I'm just saying that,
this is new. They got, all of a sudden, they will take people who are not offensive to them. It's a new thing. It's a new wave of owners. There have been 100 years of owners who wouldn't do it. That history is not lost on me. That culture of the NFL is not lost on me. Now, that wasn't the case with Shedeur Sanders, but what I'm saying is nobody's going to convince me that I know there are owners who don't want to take certain people because they offend them. For whatever the reason is, he's a distraction. I don't like his father. These are not saints. There are people who usually want to win, but basically, and I've learned this from some really smart people who usually are players and coaches, because coaches and referees to me are the last unvarnished people or honest people in sports. They always tell me, remember, people want to win, but they want to do it their way. That's what they want to do. You want to win? Yeah, but. No. So the NFL is still full of people, but. And if some of them, and I'm not saying all 32 of them, I'm not. I don't know. I don't know what the full scale of Boomer's reporting is. If I had to put a number on it, having covered this league for 45 years, what would I say at this point? Knowing a lot of the owners, considering some of those owners, my friends, owners I go play golf with and sit and break bread with, of the 32, what would I guess? I'd say there's still 10 or 12 of them at least that would say, nah, we don't want to deal with that. We'll win our way. Just like they don't want to spend the money, even if they have it. They're billionaires who won't do it. So let's be sure about what I'm saying about ownership in most sports. And in the NFL, there's even more incentive not to, because you're making a ton of money and you are the king of sport and entertainment in America. Maybe not globally, but in America. So do I believe that there are owners who wouldn't? Of course. There are owners who don't want to be distracted. That's where I get the notion from. I sat in rooms in the last 20 years, and it wasn't about race. It might have been about anything else, where people didn't want to be. He's a distraction. I don't want him.
Well, can I?
They're not going to say it publicly, but I know it exists.
Can I sell you on the concept that maybe the teams that were quarterback needy didn't have him rated as a first or second round pick, and then I will buy the concept of, look, if we're going to draft a guy who we don't consider to be a starting quarterback and he's more of a backup, then I don't want to deal with the other stuff attached to it.
Yes, I think that there's a lot of that. I think that's a perfectly sane, reasonable, and accurate position to take. Each team had its own reasons, and there are different reasons in different rounds, right? And I don't know. I'm not covering the NFL every day anymore, so I don't know. Like and by the way, you can have them not rated in the first, second round. To me, you had them rated in the fifth round. That would be from
no. What I'm saying to you, Mike, is that I can definitely get on board with the thought that once you got out of the starting quarterback, drafting to start a quarterback situation, then I definitely think teams that looked at him as more of a backup could then all say, you know what, for a backup, we don't need.
I don't want to deal with it.
I don't want to deal with it.
I just think they're not. Yes, we're not, Tommy. We're not disagreeing on what the reasoning is. And by the way, I'm not going to sit here and say it wouldn't be a distraction. I'm not. And by the way, I might be one of those guys. And I've known Deion my whole life as well. My whole professional, 30 years of it plus. I'm not going to say I wouldn't look at that and go, that's just part of the process. It's part of decision making. I just want people to be honest about it and candid, at least in their off the record conversations. I don't want to hear this notion that they all had him scouted, fourth round, fifth round or below. That's a lie. If they're trying to make that out to be the case, they're liars.
I was shocked. I was shocked where he went, and like you said too. I get your general premise, and like you're saying now as well with Shedeur Sanders, you don't believe it's about race, but I'll give you another example of a player similar to this. Tim Tebow was like this. Tim Tebow, after he was with Denver, NFL teams didn't want him because of the exposure he brought to that franchise. For a backup player.
Distraction.
Well, you just nailed the concept. Right. The backup player.
He wasn't good enough.
Correct.
To bring the circus in town.
He also wasn't good enough. In his case, he had a couple of things. He's going to bring this scrutiny we don't want, and he's maybe not good enough.
Yeah. They'll do it for a great player.
Right.
And by the way, I was surprised too that looking at Sanders play and listening to the scouts I listened to, that he wasn't seen as being worth the distraction. But again, I'm not being naive because I know the distraction. I know it. Listen, I'm part of it. I'm part of the caravan who goes to a place and has to, ask questions and go in some place where a coach. Listen, I got to know enough coaches well enough over the years where guys would pull me aside and say, they don't want to deal with it. And I understand. I get it. Once again, I want people to hear me. I am not saying that is not a reason. I'm just saying, don't act like it's not. Don't wave your hand over here to the right and say, no, look at the fingers on the left. They didn't draft this kid because they thought he was going to be a distraction. So they thought he and his father and the circumstance and the situation, and guess what? Their perception, I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with it, but this notion that the NFL, and I agree with Mel Kiper, who said this is personal. He said it defiantly. Mel Kiper, he created the modern draft, Mel Kiper, at least the coverage of it and the perception of it. So that's what it is. And the notion that the NFL is beyond reproach or beyond questioning, you guys know me. Nobody's beyond questioning and reproach. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, I think, but that Mike is like I don't dispute that either. That's kind of careening from one extreme to the other. I don't think anyone would tell you that the NFL is above reproach.
Well, no. Nobody would use. You're right, Tommy. Nobody would use that sentence. What I mean is the attitude. I mean the arrogance. That is clearly a hallmark of NFL dealings with everybody. That arrogance is sort of like, well, don't question us. Sorry,
you know the good thing about this, before we move on, the good thing about this, and you said this yesterday, Silvy, he's going to have an opportunity to prove everybody wrong.
Yeah. And get to free agency sooner, and he could cash in big.
He's got a chance to make a team and prove himself.
Yep.
And to me, by the way, what stands out to me, at least as we go forward, is, oh my God, it's Cleveland. I mean, talk about, and by the way, I'm not transferring that to Stefanski I'm just saying, look at the mistakes they've made.
Yeah, but you should be able to weave through that quarterback depth chart easier than if you landed somewhere else. Because Joe Flacco's at the top of it.
There's 5 not so good guys.
No doubt. We're in agreement on all this. Cleveland, their decision, come on now. I mean, if we're gonna go to the top of the the bad decision maker charts, don't the Cleveland Browns occupy the top spot?
Starting with giving Deshaun Watson $252 million all guaranteed.
Bingo.